Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It's Thursday, December 18th, and we're a day out from the college football playoff getting fully underway, and we got some great games this weekend. Obviously, two of them people are a little bit more down on. We'll talk about those in a second. We'll kind of just go chronologically throughout this weekend. In the first segment, we'll go Alabama, Oklahoma, Miami, Texas A&M, and then we'll get to the two G5 teams and see if they can do something special, see if they can shock the college football world this upcoming weekend. Then we'll get into all the bowl games that have happened thus far throughout bowl season and a couple coming up this weekend. And then we got to talk about the FCS playoffs. Got to give some love to Montana, Montana State, Illinois State, and Villanova, two Cinderella stories coming into the semifinals of the FCS playoffs this weekend. And then we got to do a little bit of a weekend wrap up. Brian Smith has been fired by Ohio after only 1 year. Got to talk about the details there. Still relatively hairy up there in Athens, but we will talk about that. We'll talk about Joel Klatt's quote about Cinderellas and how there are points when he was correct. There are points when I think he was way off base, and we'll talk about that. The ACC scheduling thing is uniquely ridiculous, and then we'll give some best bets to finish this thing out and head into what's hopefully going to be a great weekend of football. But let's go and jump into this thing, and let's talk about those first round games that are going on around Norman, in College Station, in Eugene, and in Oxford, Mississippi. And we'll kind of just roll through this weekend the way it is going to play out, which means we're starting over there in Norman, Oklahoma tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Alabama favored by 1.5 over Oklahoma on the road, over under at 40.5. As you can imagine, the way these two offenses have been playing, the way these two defenses have been playing the last month of the season, Oklahoma really the entire season, and Alabama really since that Florida State game on the defensive side of the ball have been incredible. It's going to start with a war. This playoff is going to start with an outright war, a true rock fight in Norman. And the big question is, how much of that game in Tuscaloosa can Oklahoma replicate? They were +3 on turnovers. They got outgained. Alabama had more first downs. Can they make that happen again? Now, it should be said, Oklahoma's made that happen quite a bit. They are very, very good at forcing turnovers pretty consistently. So it's not to say it's out of the question that they can go +3 in the turnover category once again and find their way into another tight win over Alabama. Can they pull that off? It is a huge question and something that when we talk about turnovers in general, they're usually a relatively randomized stat. Is this random, or is this just who Oklahoma is, and is this where Alabama is in their offensive kind of identity right now? The other part that I'm curious about from Alabama's side is how healthy are they? I know there's going to be certain people out. The LT Overton situation is very relatively mysterious. Hope the best for him and he can get back on the field very quickly because he is a game changer, but he is not likely to play on tomorrow. How healthy are they? Is Parker Brailsford 100%? Is he 90%? Is he close to 100%? Because that is a massive changing factor for this football team. Will Josh Cuevas be good to go? If you can tell me that guy's on the field, I feel a whole lot more confident about what this Alabama offense can do, because I don't think people appreciate just how important that guy is. If I was ranking the most important players on that Alabama offense, it goes Ty Simpson, Parker Brailsford, and then Josh Cuevas. I think he is that important to what that football team does on the offensive side of the ball. Will he be ready to go? Will he be fully healthy? Massive question mark at this very moment. And then what do you get from Ryan Williams? He obviously seems to be fully healthy. How do you utilize him? Can he make those splash plays that he is capable of making? He has not lived up to the hype, really, since that Georgia game last year. He's been a little bit quiet, a little bit all over the place, a little bit up and down. Doesn't mean he can't change the game on a specific Saturday, and he can do that tomorrow. There's no doubt about that. He absolutely can do that. The question for Oklahoma, and the question for Alabama in some ways is, since that Texas loss, how ugly can Oklahoma make it? How closely can Alabama follow what Texas did during that game over there in Dallas? Because that was really the only way anyone found an opening against this Oklahoma defense, and they were pretty slim openings. They found a couple openings early, a couple openings late in the run game, but that was just about it. It was not pretty in a lot of different ways for the Texas offense. It probably won't be pretty for the Alabama offense a number of different places throughout this game, but you got to find openings. You got to find small openings and take full advantage of them. That's what Texas did. Can Alabama replicate that? Because no one else has, including Alabama. And that first matchup didn't quite do that enough. The question for Ty Simpson, how healthy is he? Because I do think there is a question mark around. There's been talk about him having a little bit of a back injury, some things that have kind of hampered him late on this season. Would not surprise me in any sense of the word, but he's got to be okay. He's also got to get plenty of help. I don't see them magically finding a run game, but he's got to get a little bit. You got to find a way to put together some type of run game against the fifth best run defense in the country. They were at -3 rush yards against Georgia a week ago. They got to find a way to find small openings. It doesn't have to be you rush for 150 yards. If you can find a couple of rushes of 10 plus yards, 15 plus yards, that might be enough to give you enough openings in this football game. So in the first game, we talked about it. Can Oklahoma do what they did this time around or last time around? There is a possibility that the answer is yes there. They have so many different difference makers on both sides of the ball. R. Mason Thomas is going to play in this football game, and he's an absolute nightmare in a number of ways. It is going to be so interesting to see what can happen in this football game, to see if Bama can do what Texas did, to see if anyone can do what Texas did, or Oklahoma's kind of tighten the hatches. And frankly, even if you do what Texas did, it's not a guarantee that you're going to win the football game. So going to be really, really interesting to watch. I think both these teams, whichever one finds a run game, even with the quarterback with John Mateer, is he ready to roll? Can he make those big-time plays that he did make in the first-time matchup with his legs? And then the big-time X factor, as far as I'm concerned, is the kicking game. Tate Sandell just won the Lou Groza Award. Connor Tultzy's been a little bit shaky all season. So could Oklahoma just kick their way to a win? I see a reality here where this game ends 12-9, and it's all field goals, and it's ugly field position type football. That leans Oklahoma's direction pretty aggressively. I'm pretty lost on this one. I won't lie to you. In these first two matchups of this weekend, I'm relatively lost on what I go with. I have to go with the gut feeling. Both these teams are flawed. Both these teams are one-dimensional offensively. Both these teams have elite minds on each side of the ball as far as I'm concerned. It's got to be a gut feeling, and my gut feeling is Yonze Pierre is going to make a massive difference in this football game off the edge for Alabama. I believe Ty Simpson makes a number of big-time plays down the stretch of this football game, and Alabama wins it 20-17. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I was thinking about it earlier today. In these playoffs, I think the top 4 or maybe 5 units in this playoffs are on defense. That means it comes down to quarterbacks making big-time plays. I think Ty Simpson's still capable of that. It's been a little bit all over the place as of recent. If he can get a little time to just feel a little bit more comfortable, I think he's still dangerous. I still think he's a very accurate, dangerous quarterback. I think he will make the plays necessary for Alabama to win this one and move on to the Rose Bowl to take on the number 1 team in the country in the Indiana Hoosiers. Number 10, Miami, at number 7, Texas A&M. Maybe the most unpredictable matchup of this weekend, both in how it could go, who could win, and just how many points can get scored. I think both defenses are more than capable. I think if you catch Carson Beck and Marcel Reed on the right days, they're really, really hard guys to stop, and they can create incredible explosives. We know what these wide receiver cores are capable of, especially Malachi Toney, Mario Craver, Kevin Concepcion on the A&M side. It's a special matchup, and it is a very unpredictable matchup in a lot of different ways. They are flawed, but they can find openings and be very, very dangerous in a hurry. The Miami secondary might be the most underrated position unit in the entire playoffs. They've done such a good job this season, and it sounds like Keontae Scott is going to be back in this football game. So the question is this, and I think a lot of people noticed this. When A&M played Texas, their only loss of the season, I don't want to say that, they beat Notre Dame earlier in the season. The only elite team they played late in the season was Texas. They lose that game largely because the Texas defense was able to just rush 4 pretty much every single snap, drop 7 in coverage, and say, you're going to throw into tight windows today. You're going to have to find a way to beat us with your arm. Obviously, the injury early in the game to Marcel Reed did not help his case to be able to extend and make plays with his legs, but I still think the Texas defense had him pinned in pretty good. Miami can do that. Miami absolutely can rush 4 guys with Ruben Bain and Justin Scott and Akeem Mesidor on the front end, and then Keontae Scott makes big-time plays on the back end. O.J. Frederick makes a big-time play. Those guys are capable of that, the same way Texas was, maybe even more so than Texas was, especially on the back end, with guys like Keontae Scott and O.J. Frederick and all of these really, really talented individuals. They can force Marcel Reed into bad situations. A&M can force Carson Beck into bad situations. They love to play man coverage. That's the way A&M plays football. That's the way Mike Elko has played football for quite some time. He's going to line up and play you straight up. He's going to play man coverage a lot. The question is, can you keep up with these guys, especially number 10 Malachi Toney? He's the game changer. He's the guy that can totally turn this game on its head. He's the guy that can change this entire playoff. If he's really probably one of the 5 best football players in this playoff, he can totally change this thing. And if he gets single coverage consistently and he can handle that, he's going to do dangerous things in this football game. And he's going to do dangerous things against just about every football team that he plays. You got to find a way to slow down number 10 if you're A&M. It's not going to be an easy thing, especially if you can't get after Carson Beck, which Cassius Howell in this pass rush wasn't able to do all that often against Arch Manning. Now, Arch Manning did make some great plays with his legs, escaped some dirty pockets, did the things that he is capable of doing that maybe Carson Beck isn't quite as capable of doing, but they didn't get home quick enough against Texas. There's no doubt about that. Cassius Howell was kept entirely quiet. Is he ready to make those big-time plays, to change this game, to maybe force a fumble from Carson Beck? Because he's definitely more of a statue than you just played over there in Austin. And then Le'Veon Moss. Is he healthy? How healthy is he? Because this run game was, I don't want to say nowhere to be found, but missed a lot in the Texas game. Missed a lot of yards that they could have had that would have totally changed that football game. You're going to need number 8 on the football field. And it sounds like he will be. How close to 100% is he in? How can the Miami defensive line kind of handle this offensive line for A&M that's talking a little trash leading up to this football game? But this is going to be another one that I'm a little bit lost on. I think it's special because you can go any which way. At the end of the day, I'm going to lean towards the coach that I trust more, and that's Mike Elko. I cannot trust Mario Cristobal in this big-time spot. I think Miami does have advantages on the lines of scrimmage. I really do. I think this offensive line is difference makers. I think this defensive line is dangerous as can be with Ruben Bain and Nakeem Mesidor. I don't think they have the ability to make the plays down the stretch. I think Carson Beck will make a couple of massive errors on the road, and Texas A&M will find a way to move on and play Ohio State, the second best team in the country, which will be a very, very interesting matchup. Number 11, Tulane on the road at number 6, Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 17.5, over under at 56.5. We got to approach this one from what does Tulane need to do to pull the upset type of perspective. I don't think we can talk about this one like it's an even matchup in a lot of ways, but let's just go from that perspective. You got to hope. The Ole Miss offense is missing a step without Kiffin, and frankly, you could get that on the Ole Miss defense as well. Pete Golding has had a lot on his plate over the last couple of weeks. He's taken over as head coach. He's had to put together a recruiting class. He's had to keep that together. He's had to make sure they're ready for the portal. He's had to coach a defense on top of all of that. So there could be an opening on both sides of the ball where they're not totally lost, they're not totally terrible, but they're just a little bit off kilter, especially early in that game. Maybe Tulane can take advantage, jump out to a 10-point lead, and then we're really having a conversation. And Trinidad Chambliss is in a position he hasn't been a lot this season. You got to control the clock and run the football. You should be able to do that. A lot of people, pretty much everyone, has been able to run the football on this Ole Miss team. You got to be able to do that. If you can't do that, it's going to be a really long day at the office because I don't see the Ole Miss offense not being efficient in this football game. The Tulane defense has been a little all over the place this season, but the third thing that I think they have to do, elite red zone defense. It doesn't have to be outright perfect. If you can hold them to 2 or 3 times instead of 7, you're giving yourself a shot, and that's really all you can ask for in this football game on the road. If you can find a way to get a couple of openings against an offense that lost its play caller and a defense that has its play caller kind of occupied elsewhere for the time being, control the clock and run the football, which hypothetically you should be able to do against this Ole Miss Rebels defense, and then just get a couple of 3s on the board for Ole Miss instead of 7s, you can be in this football game, and you can be in it late, and then you never know what happens. You never know what player is going to make the mistake. You never know which player is going to step up. For all we know, Jake Retzlaff can handle this moment better than Trinidad Chambliss can. I wouldn't bet on that, but it doesn't mean that's not possible. I do think Tulane will be ready to roll. I think they're ready to fight for John Sumrall. He's left that place in the perfect way. In fact, every other coach should watch that as a way to go about your business if you're leaving one of your programs. But I think they're going to play better than they did the last time around. I can't trust their defense against this Ole Miss offense. I think Ole Miss just has too many guys. I think there is a number of ways that you could stop Ole Miss if you could match up on the outside one-on-one. I don't think they can do that. So I think it's going to be really hard to hold them down for 4 quarters. I'm going to take Ole Miss to win this one 37-17. I could see this one being a close game going into halftime, and then Ole Miss kind of takes over. Deep in this football game, Kejuan Lacey has a day, and Ole Miss is able to win this one relatively comfortably and move on to a rematch against the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 12, JMU against number 5, Oregon. Oregon favored by 21 in this game, 20.5, kind of been bouncing back and forth there. 48.5 the over-under. This is the nightcap on Saturday. Again, got to approach it from a what does JMU have to do to upset them type of situation, and it's a really tightrope walk. Now, I think they have one thing in their advantage if they can pull it off, and that's a big-time question mark. They're number 2 in the country in time of possession. That's the way you upset big-time teams, is you control the football, you keep it out of the offense's hands, and you find a way to get 1 or 2 turnovers, and that's really that's been the way people go about business if they're going to get that big-time upset. JMU's been capable of doing that against the teams that they have played. Can they do that against a front like Oregon is a big-time question mark. Landon Ellis, their big-time player on the outside, got to make 1 or 2. Or maybe 2 or 3 one-on-one catches that flip the field, that change, that get momentum going, that give you that one big play that gives you a little bit of belief. Because if they put you away, if Oregon goes up early, they get one pick and they're up 14-0 before you know it, this game's over. And there's no shot for JMU to get back in it. If you can get one big play from Landon Ellis early in this football game, flip the field, get a little bit of juice behind you, then you never know what happens. And then you never know how Oregon's going to react in that position. And then you got to push Dante Moore off his spot. That is not remotely guaranteeing you're going to stop Dante Moore, but he has been absolutely lethal. If he can stand on his spot and just absolutely and go through his progressions and then rip the football to the open guy. You have to push him off the spot. You have to take him away from his primary and make him try to create on with his legs or try to create throwing the ball down the field while moving. It is a big-time question mark for him. It's a question mark for most quarterbacks. So it's not really a crazy idea, but you got to find a way to push him off his spot, make him a little bit uncomfortable, just not let him find his way to Kenyon Sadiq time and time again, because then you're in trouble. I do worry about JMU's reliance on the run. That can work. You can find a way to find small gaps. You can run for 3.5 yards per carry, slowly move the chains, and find a way to win this football game. But Wayne Knight has to be special, and the only way he can be special is you open a couple of run lanes for him, allow him to get one-on-one with some of these second-level players, and then he does something different. I think those are going to be few and far between. If I'm being totally honest, there is a JMU script here where they can do an incredible thing and upset Oregon on the road. I think Oregon's going to come into this one trying to prove something, and I think they're going to play this one very aggressive from the opening. I think they're going to jump out to an early lead and then kind of coast to the finish line. I'll take Oregon 34-14. I think that defensive line is just going to be too much for JMU. I think Oregon's offense is going to come out swinging and then kind of relax into their normal state of business in the second half. And I think Oregon gets a big-time win and moves on to play a Texas Tech team that seems to be the biggest question mark of this entire thing. Not necessarily because we don't think they're great. How do they match up against these elite teams? I think we'll find out in a little bit when Oregon is able to face off against them. But it's a great group of games. Obviously, 2 are a little bit more intense, a little bit more unpredictable than the other 2. Doesn't mean we couldn't see a shocker. Doesn't mean we couldn't see some incredible things from 2 teams in JMU and Tulane that know exactly who they are and know how to go about business and can play these games relatively close. Obviously, we'll see how that develops, but I'm very excited for this weekend. It gets started tomorrow night with an incredible one in Norman that I expect to be a downright rock fight. But we'll talk about that more as the time goes on, and we'll break that one down, obviously, when it does finish up. But we got to talk about bowl games, and we got to talk about the FCS playoffs. Got to give that some love as well. We'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the games going on this weekend. Alabama, Oklahoma, Miami, Texas A&M, Tulane, Ole Miss, and JMU, Oregon. I will take the two major favorites in Oregon and Ole Miss. I'm going to take A&M to get one at home, and I'm going to take Alabama to get a big-time win on the road and move on to an Indiana team that'll be fascinating to watch up against them. But let's get into the bowl games that have gone on thus far. Let's get into the FCS playoffs that have happened thus far and the ones happening this weekend, because if you're not giving love to the FCS, you're not covering college football the right way as far as I'm concerned at the very least. But let's start with the bowl games that have already happened here. Salute to Veterans Bowl. Jacksonville State gets a big-time win, 17-13 over Troy. This is a really, really fun game, and it was a very interesting one because I don't know how many people have gotten a chance to watch DeAndre Johnson this year. Incredible football player. 6'8", 6 catches, 101 yards in this football game. It was his show. And then the Troy offense kind of got manhandled. They got a pick six early on in this football game, or a fumble, scoop and score. Can't quite remember. Apologies for that. But they only scored 6 total points offensively, had 2 INTs. It was a little all over the place, but Charles Kelly has done an incredible job over there at Jacksonville State, taking over for Rich Rod. Troy, I think, has a very, very bright future ahead of them, but this is a big-time win for that program that I think could be building something pretty special down there. Old Dominion gets a 24-10 win over USF. Pretty far fall for USF in the back half of this season. When you lose your coach and you lose your quarterback, that tends to happen. And it was Gaston Moore for USF. It was Quinn Heineckel for Old Dominion. 2 backup quarterbacks. Colton Joseph found his way into the portal from Old Dominion. Obviously, Byron Brown, an interesting name to watch as we move forward, whether it's the draft or to Auburn or somewhere else for the rest of his football career. But Quinn Heineckel took over this game late, especially with his legs. Got a little bit lit up late in this football game and somehow came back into it. Don't know if that was the best idea, but at the end of the day, the Old Dominion defense was really the show. They forced so many turnovers in this game, was all over the place, played incredible football, and Ricky Ron and the Monarchs make an incredible season. 10 wins for them. They go on to what's probably going to be a pretty dangerous team going into next year, even without Colton Joseph, and we'll have to watch what Colton Joseph does going forward. But an incredible season for Old Dominion that comes to a pretty incredible end over a big-time win over a USF team. Delaware gets a 20-13 win over Louisiana in the Ventures Bowl. This was kind of an interesting one. Louisiana's put together a really good season, and they had a very, very good rushing attack coming into this football game. It was kind of just Lunch Winfield out there, and yes, his first name is Lunch, as crazy as that sounds, but he fought in this football game. It looked like he had multiple injuries late in this game, and he found a way to keep fighting. It just wasn't quite enough. Delaware was +3 in the turnover battle. It was 3-0 in that category, and Ryan Carty and the Blue Hens get a big-time win here, finish off a very nice season for that football team, and they move forward with a very interesting future. Probably not doing any playoff hunting here pretty soon, but definitely a team that you could see in the postseason pretty consistently moving forward. Missouri State, Arkansas State, the one coming up on actually tonight at 9 p.m. Really fun matchup. Ryan Beard has left Missouri State for Coastal Carolina, but the Bears have a massive chance to get their first bowl game win ever. They find their way up from the FCS and have really put together a great program at the FBS level. Special moment for this program for these players. Problem is Jalen Raynor's on the other side, and I think that guy's an absolute difference maker. Hasn't been the best passer in the world throughout his career, but when he gets out into open space, he is dangerous as can be, and he's very, very smart. In these types of moments, if you're making me pick someone on a neutral field, I'm going to lean towards Jalen Raynor's direction a number of times. I'll take the Red Wolves to win the first Xbox Bowl ever, for whatever that means to you. Arkansas State finds a way to win that one and caps a very, very nice season for that team. Kennesaw State versus Western Michigan, 2 of my favorite stories in college football, particularly Kennesaw State. You fire Jerry Bohannon after your first year in the FBS. A lot of people, including myself, question the move, and Jerry Mack comes in and does an incredible job. There's an argument to be made that he's National Coach of the Year. He's done an incredible job with this football team. And Lance Taylor just putting together a rock-solid program up there at Western Michigan. Both teams very explosive on offense. WMU loves to lean on Brock Lowry's legs. Very, very dynamic quarterback, over 1,000 yards rushing this year. I'm going to lean towards him and Western Michigan in this one. I think KSU's done an incredible job this year. I think Western Michigan might be a little bit more battle tested, might be a little bit more comfortable with these two teams and their approaches. I think Brock Lowry finds a way to put on a show in this one, and they find a way to win this one. I think their defense is able to match up a little bit better with Kennesaw State than vice versa there. Memphis at NC State, the game that will lead us into the playoff, is a really, really fun one between two teams. Memphis has lost their coach, but both teams have their quarterbacks, and that's really all I need. If you're telling me Brendan Lewis and CJ Bailey are facing off, that's appointment television, as far as I'm concerned. Two very, very incredible guys to watch, and two teams that haven't quite had the season that they expected. I think Memphis came in with playoff aspirations, rightfully so. NC State looked at a wide open ACC and said, who says CJ Bailey can't put together a great season and do something special this year? They've both kind of fallen back down to earth just a little bit, but they got a really fun game tomorrow. And if you're telling me Hollywood Smothers is going to be on the field, which it seems like he is going to be, all this is relatively up in the air, as it often is in the bowl times, but I think NC State finds a way to win this football game. I think Hollywood Smothers is just a massive difference maker that is not nearly talked about enough on the national stage, but I'll take NC State to win that one and send us into the playoffs for the weekend. And that includes the FCS playoffs, and we're kind of jumping in late here. So apologies to the FCS fans out there. We got the semifinals coming up this weekend. We got to go over what has happened thus far. North Dakota State was minus money coming into this playoff to win it. A 32-team playoff, they were minus money to win it. It's crazy. I understand that. They were upset by Illinois State in the second round. A crazy, crazy game, 29-28. Incredible, incredible matchup. And Illinois State, kind of the story of this tournament. Illinois State came into this one 8-4, wasn't even a seed in this playoff. And they'll meet Villanova on Saturday night. Going to be an incredible, incredible matchup, an incredible year for that team. And no Dakota teams left in the field. If you followed FCS playoffs at all, you understand how big of a deal that is. South Dakota State has been incredible. South Dakota's put together a very nice couple of years. North Dakota was a good team this year. And then obviously, North Dakota State has been the cream of the crop for a long time over there in FCS football, but none of them left in the field thus far. And Villanova also on a special run as well. The 12th seed coming into this thing, they find their way to the Final Four. So we got two Cinderellas facing off on Saturday night. If that Oregon game gets a little bit blowout, I think you're going to have a really, really fun one over there for Villanova and Illinois State. But let's start with the Battle of Montana, the one that went a little bit chalk on that side of the bracket. The number 3 seed Montana at the number 2 seed Montana State. A special rivalry matchup with a shot to go to the national championship. Montana State favored by 4 in this game. It was 31-28 earlier in this season when they battled in Missoula over there for Montana. This one's in Bozeman, and Justin Lamson has done an incredible job with this offense. The Bobcats are rolling right now, and they got a really, really good team. They're going up against a really good running back. They're going up against an Eli Gilman, 1,400 yards, 20 touchdowns on the ground this year. There's special players all over the place in this football game, and I think you're going to realize just how high level some of these FCS teams are if you were to watch this game, which I highly, highly recommend. I'll take Montana State to win this one, 31-27. I think it's a fun battle. I think they go back and forth pretty good. And I tend to believe this is probably the team that you see lifting that trophy in a couple of weeks. But at the end of the day, really fun matchup, a battle for Montana. I think Montana State wins another one and they find their way to the national title. And then the Battle of Cinderellas. Illinois State at number 12, Villanova. Villanova favored by 1.5 in this game, over under at 52.5. It is going to be Saturday night. This is special. This is one of those things that a lot of people will point to and they'll say, this could happen in the FBS. Probably can't happen in the FBS, but has been an incredible season for these two teams. An 8-4 team coming into the playoffs finds a way to beat one of the more dominant teams in recent memory in the FCS, and they get a chance to play for possibly a national title on January 5th. Pat McQuaid's done an incredible job over there at Villanova, and then on the defensive side for Illinois State, Ty Niekamp, been one of the best linebackers in the entire country. It's going to be really, really fun to watch this one unfold. I'm going to take Illinois State. I'll go out on a limb. I'll say this team is going to walk in, get another big-time upset on the road. They win 27-23, and they get a shot at a national title after going 8-4 in the season. crazy, crazy world down there in the FCS, but it is possible in a lot of different ways over there. An incredible two teams, and they found a way to give themselves a chance at a championship, and that's really all you can ask for at a time like now. But incredible games this upcoming weekend, both in the bowl game world. I understand. We'll talk about that more. I have a pretty impassioned rant sometime next week to talk about the bowl season and why I still believe it very much matters. And then we got the FCS playoffs. If those playoff games in the FBS get a little bit boring, a little bit blowouty early, you can find your way over to these games, and I promise you, you're going to find some wars that might shock you how high level some of this football is. But we'll get into that as they unfold. We will break down those games on Monday as well. Of course, we got to make sure we know what's going on January 5th for the FCS title. But let's take another break here. When we come back, we got a lot to wrap up for this week. The Ohio coach, Brian Smith, has been fired for cause. We'll talk about that briefly. The Joel Klatt quote didn't sit right with me in a lot of ways, and we'll talk about the ACC scheduling before we get to some best bets before we get out of here for the weekend. Stick right with us, and we'll be right back with that. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the bowl games that are going on this weekend, that have already gone on this week, and then the FCS playoffs, something that I still don't think gets nearly enough love in the national college football space. I get it. I understand why it doesn't. I still think it's an incredible thing that we all should take part in this upcoming weekend. But let's get into a little bit of a headline catch-up, one that I just saw on my phone 2 seconds ago. It looks like Jaden Baugh might be entering the portal. I'd watch Texas very closely. Just hired their running back coach, Jabbar Jalouk. I would tend to believe that Texas is in the lead there in a number of different facets, both with the running back coach and probably in the checkbook. We'll talk about that more next week, including all of the transfer portal news, a lot of stuff flying around with Dylan Raiola and the quarterbacks, but just wanted to get that one out there. Could be losing a running back over there in Gainesville. Could be gaining one over there in Austin with plenty of other suitors out there, I promise you that. But let's go ahead and jump into this, and let's get into Brian Smith has been fired at Ohio for cause. This is something that is still relatively hairy. The way that they put it was engaging in serious professional misconduct and participating in activities that reflect unfavorably on the university. Pretty boilerplate, pretty vanilla language. There's not much to take away from there. There were certain reports that came out yesterday. I don't want to say anything that's not true. I don't want to say anything that's not substantiated. So I'll leave it alone for the time being. We will see what happens here. Obviously, when you get fired for cause, there's something to be talked about. How serious it is, how much it affects his future, we'll find out. The short, for now, this is a really solid job that can do a lot of really special things that a lot of candidates might be interested in, whether from the group of 5 level or Power 4 offensive coordinators being interested. I'd watch this one really closely, but doesn't look great for Brian Smith. We'll see how actually damning it is as more information comes out. Again, don't want to say anything that's not totally correct at this very moment. Joel Klatt had a quote this last week that made a lot of people mad, including myself, and not all of it made me mad. I want to make that very clear. But there were certain parts of this that were outright insane. Joel Klatt was on The Next Round, a great podcast that does a lot of different college football and college sports talk in general, and they were talking about the G5 situation. And Joel Klatt had some choice words for the NCAA basketball tournament. The quote goes like this, and he's talking about football in this case. We don't want Cinderellas. We want the best teams playing each other at the end. And he goes on a little diatribe in the middle, but he finishes it off with, the NCAA basketball tournament is a joke. It's the dumbest tournament and the least fair tournament in all of sports. Let's just take that second part for half a second. He's remarkably wrong. First of all, I like the idea of a Cinderella. I would love the idea of a football Cinderella. I don't think it's going to happen in really any sense of the word, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but the NCAA basketball tournament is incredible. And the other part of that is no one ever said it was meant to crown the perfect champion. I would argue the CFP in some ways doesn't always crown the perfect champion. So that's not really what college sports is about. And maybe this is a conversation more to be kind of drawn out a little bit more later. college sports is about kind of regionality and winning your conference and battling it out with the people right around you. I get we've kind of lost that, so now it's about the national championship and just about nothing else. But the reality is, it's never really about crowning the perfect champion or making sure that you have the exact right team. It's never going to be the exact right team. I would argue Ohio State last season wasn't the exact right team, but they put it together at the end, and they played incredible football that I don't think anyone else in the country was capable of playing. So I'm more than fine with them being a champion. I believe they were the best team last year. I don't think it always works out that way, and I don't think that's a terrible thing. The other part of it, when they were talking about we don't want Cinderellas / we want the best teams playing at the end. The idea that we can't have both the best teams playing at the end and inclusion for the G5 is a little bit ridiculous to me. I understand that you want as many great teams in the playoff as you possibly can get. I understand that Notre Dame is almost definitely beating Tulane and JMU by a pretty comfortable margin. I'd say the same thing for Vanderbilt, say the same thing for Texas and BYU. I would argue the 12 best teams in the country are not in the playoff. I totally understand that. I agree with a lot of people because of that. If we get to the Final Four and it's Texas Tech or Oregon, and it's Indiana, it's Georgia, it's Ohio State, are we really going to bemoan the fact that JMU got a spot? Are we really going to be so angry that the G5 even got a chance in this bracket? Because that's the best teams playing at the end. That's the 4 best teams in the country: Texas Tech, Indiana, Georgia, and Ohio State, as we've decided throughout the 12 games, and they're playing at the end. We do get the best at the end, but we also get to include a G5 team that's had a remarkable season and deserves recognition. Now, I've said this before, and I will say this a million times over. I don't think the G5 will ever be a threat to win a national title, and I think the G5 playoff is the move going forward. I think that is a great place for the G5 to have a jumping off point. I think they can do incredible things with that and make quite a bit of money in the meantime. That being said, they don't want to do that. You can't sell someone on something they absolutely don't want to do. The other part of that is you are boxing out a massive part of the sport. Whether it's justified or not, I would argue it's relatively justified in a lot of ways in the game of football. It doesn't mean you're not boxing out a certain part of the sport that could have a special team. Now, I don't think it's all that likely, but I would argue Boise State a season ago is more than deserving of getting into the playoffs. So I just don't think we should talk in absolutes. Now, if there's a way to find a middle ground of the G5 has to be in the top 15 to be in the CFP. Now, I hope they don't cook the books to make sure they're not in the top 15 in that case, which I worry they would be. But at the end of the day, if that's something that we find out and we find a way to do that equitably and fairly, I'm with that. That makes sense to me. I think that is a fair way to move forward. That being said, the idea that we just have to cut it clean and we have to make sure no G5 teams get in because they have no shot, I'd argue there's plenty of other teams that prove they don't have a shot or don't deserve a shot to go win a national title, and maybe JMU did that this year. It wasn't perfect. Maybe they're not an elite team. Maybe they'll get beat by 45 on Saturday. It doesn't mean they didn't do something special this year, and it doesn't mean they shouldn't be recognized. We can disagree on the way the playoff should work. I tend to believe a G5 playoff will be an incredible thing for those teams. They don't think that, at least not as of right now. And I don't think it's a travesty to the world that the G5 finds their way in, and I really don't think it's a travesty that 2 of them found their way in because the ACC is that incompetent this year. That's really all I got for you. Now, he did have a correct point in there that should be said and should be talked about a little bit more. The G5's only in the playoff to avoid getting sued. That's true. That's absolutely true. The CFP wants to make sure they don't get in trouble with antitrust laws, and that's a totally true thing. It's unfortunate, but it is absolutely true. And that's something that will have to be talked about as we move forward, and as the CFP continues to get talked about, we'll see what happens. And I think everyone understands Saturday has a lot to do with what the future of the G5 looks like in the playoff. I don't think they can really compete. I don't think they can win a national title. It doesn't mean I don't think they deserve the recognition of being in the playoff at the end of the season, and I think that's where a lot of people disagree. That's where me and Joe Klatt disagree in a little bit of ways, but I think we agree in a lot more ways than we don't. But obviously, we'll see how this develops. We'll see if the Cinderella finds their way into the second round, and then that'll probably change the conversation for the wrong reasons, but at the end of the day, it'll change the conversation. The ACC might have done the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, guys. It's the ACC expanding to a 9-game schedule next season for 12 teams. and then 5 teams are going to play 8 games, and you guessed it, Florida State and Clemson are in those 5 teams because schedule balance. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't understand how they thought of this idea. I don't understand how they greenlit this idea, especially. But this is what happens when you have a conference that is far too big, that has multiple of its members that don't really want to be a part of it very much longer, and have leadership that are a little bit lost right now. That's just what the ACC is. That's why this season was such a nightmare. That's why these tiebreakers are a true nightmare. And the crazier part about it is they were asked about the tiebreaker scenarios. What happens if you have an 8-0 team against an 8-1 team? Who gets preferential treatment? Is the 8-0 team because they're undefeated? 8-1, did they have to play that extra game? Well, they'll be very mad. I can promise you that. The ACC basically said we'll figure it out later. They didn't have an answer. They didn't know exactly how they were going to handle that. They said, we'll figure that out. This is going to be a mess. A team like Georgia Tech, who plays 8 games, could finish, let's say, 7-1. And Miami finds a way. They play 9 games, and they finish 7-2. Who gets in? Who deserves to get in? I think both teams have a good gripe to get into the title game. They better pray there's 2 undefeated teams and no one else, because that's the only way this makes sense. And frankly, I would be mad if I was an 8-1 team that played 9 games and I lost out to an 8-0 team that played 8. It doesn't make sense. It's a really, really, really bad move, and it puts this conference in an even worse position moving forward, both for their title and their prospects for the playoff. I don't understand it. It's silly as can be. There's no doubt about that. It is absolutely ridiculous, and I can't imagine it is going to go perfectly. In fact, I imagine it's going to go truly terribly. And I think in 2027 they're expanding to all but one team plays 9 games. It's ridiculous, and it's entirely the fault of the ACC and one team up there in South Bend that just refuses to join that conference. Again, more to talk about later on all of this, but just a ridiculous decision from the ACC here. Let's talk about some best bets, though. Let's try to get on the right foot for the CFP. I'll take the Texas A&M Miami over 51.5. I think these defenses are very good. I think these guys are difference makers. I think Casey Concepcion, I think Malachi Toney, I think Mario Craver, I just think they're difference makers. I think CJ Daniels. It's too hard to cover these guys one-on-one, especially one-on-one. If A&M's going to cover Malachi Toney that way, it's going to be a long afternoon. He is going to make big-time plays because that's just who he is. I think he is probably the best football player that will step foot on the field in College Station on Saturday, and I think there's going to be points. I think it's going to be a little bit of a track meet early, and then the defenses start to settle in, and we have a really, really fun game down to the wire that has quite a bit of points in it. I'll take Ole Miss minus 17.5 over Tulane. I think they want to prove a point. Now, a lot of people have kind of pushed back on this fact because they think a lot of the players are finding their way over to Baton Rouge with Lane Kiffin at the end of this. I tend to agree with a lot of those people, whether you want to talk about Trinidad Chambliss or Kejuan Lacey. I tend to believe they're going to find their way over to Baton Rouge. That doesn't mean they don't want to prove that they're more than Lane Kiffin. That doesn't mean that the seniors, especially on this team, like Suntarian Perkins and all of these really, really talented guys. We got Caden Lee that might be playing his last game as a Rebel, or one of them. He wants to prove a point. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think they want to jump on these teams. I think both Ole Miss and Oregon want to jump on their teams and kind of put them away pretty early. Maybe be able to rest a couple of guys late in these games, as upsetting as that sounds. I think Ole Miss finds a way to pull away pretty early, and then Kejuan Lacey just takes over this football game. I'll take Alabama, minus 1.5 over Oklahoma. This is really, really weird because I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I'm leaning on my belief in Ty Simpson. I'm leaning on my belief in Kalen DeBoer, and I think they'll be ready to respond. I think that guy's too smart of an offensive coach to not have a couple of answers. It will not be explosive play after explosive play. I can almost promise you that. But I think they'll find a way to win this one by at least a field goal. I think they'll find a way to slowly outpace this team, and Ty Simpson will make one massive throw in this football game that will change the entire identity of it. Oregon JMU over 47.5. I'm a little bit nervous about this one, but I like points. In Eugene, I like a lot of them coming from the Oregon Ducks, as you can imagine. But this is a team that I think is just going to hit their stride, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But they are going to find a way to get a little bit more healthy. I don't know if Decoria Moore or Gary Bryant. I imagine Evan Stewart won't play in this game just out of precautionary reasons unless they absolutely need him, which I don't expect that to be the case. I think they'll have answers for JMU up front. I think they'll find a way to get a couple of big-time turnovers. And then I think they might get a little bit over-aggressive on defense, and JMU finds a way to break a couple of big-time runs or a couple of big-time throws. I don't think it's going to be huge. I think JMU maybe scores 14 in this game, but I think they find a way to push this thing over 48.5 or 47.5, excuse me. I think Oregon puts up quite a bit of those points, the lion's share of those points, but JMU finds a way to add on just enough to get us over at least to 48. And one of my futures, I'll take Oregon to win the national title. This is a gamble, but I think this Oregon team has a chance to do something really special in this playoffs. If Decoria Moore is healthy for this football game or for the one that they play next, hypothetically, next against Texas Tech, if I can get Gary Bryant Jr. back, if I can get Evan Stewart back, this team is as dangerous as can be offensively. I think they might have the best offensive line in the entire field. Their running game is as comprehensive and it has as many guys as you could possibly want. Dante Moore is actually using his legs very effectively the last couple of weeks. And they got difference makers all over the field, especially if Evan Stewart and Decoria Moore are back on that football field. Then Kenyon Sadiq is just wide open all game, and he's a nightmare. He's the best tight end in the country as far as I'm concerned. I think this is going to be awesome. It's going to be an awesome, awesome team to watch. I think they have a JMU team they should be able to handle and take a little bit of time off in the second half against. I think they're going to jump on Texas Tech, a team that hasn't quite played the talent level and the physicality level of a team like Oregon. I think the revenge factor against Indiana is very real, and then they're healthy and rolling, and they got one more game to win a national title against either maybe Ohio State, maybe Georgia, maybe someone else makes a run. But regardless, I think this Oregon team is special. I think they have so much juice rolling in their direction, and I think they're getting healthy at the right time, and I think people forget just how good Evan Stewart is at football. If he's back on the football field, everything changes for this team very, very quickly. But it's going to be an awesome weekend. I think there are so many games that can do really, really special things. Obviously, two of them are outpacing the other two. I don't think that has to be said. I don't think that's disrespectful to Tulane or JMU. It doesn't mean I won't be watching those games very closely. It doesn't mean those games don't mean the world to those kids, whether it's Jake Retzlaff on Tulane, whether it's Alonze Barnett on JMU, Wayne Knight. It's a special game. And it's two teams that have earned a spot in this playoff, whether you like the rules or not. They have earned a spot in this playoff. They deserve a shot to get out on that football field and prove themselves. We'll see what happens. And it'll be really, really fun to watch. And I think we'll be coming off two games that more than delivered. So I don't think you'll have to worry too much if you don't quite get the games you want to get over there in Oxford and in Eugene. But it's going to be a fun weekend. Buy into it all. I understand it's a little bit easy to bemoan the fact that we got two relatively predictable blowouts coming out this weekend. You never know. It's college football. And even if you do know, let's enjoy the moment. Let's enjoy these teams taking the field on Saturday and on Friday. It's going to be really, really fun to watch. I'll put out my full college football playoff predictions tomorrow on my X and Instagram, so check that out, JACFB podcast. It's going to be really hard to pick the rest of the way, but feel pretty confident about what I got this upcoming weekend. Going to be really, really fun to watch all of this unfold. But thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment. Means the absolute world to me, helps things keep going here. And I think we're about to kick up into gear because we got a transfer portal that's going to be absolutely on fire. A lot of stuff to keep on track of. But we'll be back on Monday. We'll break it all down. We'll break down all of the games, do a little bit of early look at some of the games coming up later in the month. It's going to be really fun. Enjoy it all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that great stuff. And I'll see you guys on Monday.